right, hello and welcome to episode 33 of The Crackdown. Coming back at you with another one. Today we have a special guest, actually the second LPL caster on one of my podcasts. In 2 days in a row, we have Lyric here from the LPL. He is the color commentator over there, former coach of CB LOL, former coach in LMS, so been around the world, but now he is in Shanghai. So it's 1 a.m. for him. Stayed up late to do this episode. Definitely appreciate you doing that and being here, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I always love getting on, especially these shows, because I mean, you were talking about it before, right? There's not enough exposure for LPL, and I just love talking about LPL with other people since there's not enough people that actually watch LPL. So, thanks for inviting me on.
Yep. How you doing, Doinb?
You've done everything right, mate. You've literally been all around the world casting. You moved to the LPL. LPL becomes the biggest region in the world. They hold worlds in Shanghai. You're in Shanghai. Riot just goes, I'm not seeing any connections here. Like, who is he again? Some sort of guy wants to be like, we got Freak for that. Why would we hire someone else to talk shit about you? And then next thing you know, you're just watching like the rest of us. But
yeah, I mean, he's just an NA caster, right?
Not bitter. I know exactly.
He's a North American-born caster. But I mean, I think that's the obvious first topic that we can jump into here, which is something that obviously came up on Reddit. A lot of people have been discussing. Worlds in China, strongest region in the world right now is LPL. And Riot decided on the English-speaking broadcast, we have 0 LPL casters on that broadcast. I mean, they even went with former LPL casters like Raz over current LPL casters, which seemed really strange to a lot of people. So we asked Munchables yesterday about what he thought was the reason. He thought it was maybe logistical. From your perspective, why do you think there was like this absence of LPL talent on the broadcast?
So I don't know if I could speculate why Riot decided, but at least from my point of view, I actually totally understand it because I've only been a caster for 6 months. I haven't even been a caster for a year. So I can understand why they wouldn't invite me personally on, especially you look at how Riot's always done it in the past, right? And they definitely want to build people up. I think you can look at the past with people like Frost, where especially back then when Worlds didn't have play-ins, right? It was like the IWCA or whatever it used to be called.
It's pretty much
and
play-ins.
It's okay, yeah, but you put casters on that. At first they get a little test. You put casters on things like All-Stars, Rift Rivals, maybe give them the play-ins of MSI, which it just kind of sucked that none of that happened this year, so they couldn't really give us those waters to test. But I can at least understand from my perspective that I'm a totally new quantity in terms of Riot. I've never worked with any of their other casters, so if they did put me on with those dynamics, it would be a big question mark. And then we look at our other color caster in LPL. His name's Dagda. This is also his first time in a major region, so your two analysts are both very new and very green. And the only caster that's been here a long time is Hysterics. He's a play-by-play, so much more about the hype and stuff like that. So I can understand why Riot says, hey, let's invite Raz back. Raz spent so many years in the LPL. Raz actually still watched LPL. He was giving us feedback constantly and was one of the people in charge of helping us develop just out of his own goodwill. So yeah, I actually think it's a reasonable decision from Riot, at least if you come at it from the perspective of tenure.
Okay. I mean, the thing is, so where that breaks down for me is you have people on the broadcast that literally are just that aren't even casters, right? So the obvious one would be Kadril. Now, Kadril I think is fantastic, right? I've platformed him a lot. He's been on my live views constantly.
Amazing.
Yeah, he did work for EU Masters, did work for LEC during playoffs, but he doesn't have casting experience he's had casting experience in terms of EU Masters, but he didn't cast any LEC games, didn't cast any games in a major region, and he's getting the shot at being able to cast at Worlds. I think he said analyst desk / casting, so I assume that means that there's some amount of casting that he will do at the tournament. So when I see that, it's why not, if that's enough tenure, if that's enough time spent within the casting field to be able to be platformed at Worlds, why not somebody from LPL? Just based off the region that LPL is so strong. I feel from my perspective, LPL is going to be significantly underrepresented in terms of what Western audience is going to be able to take in and what they're going to be able to know about the region at the World Championship.
The problem with that, right, is First of all, like I agree with the way you set that up, Dom. It's actually a very good sort of control group because Cadrill is far less qualified to cast at Worlds than Lyric here is. Like Lyric, even if he says I only did 6 months, well, that's 6 months more than Cadrill did, and you are a commentator, mate, and you worked your way up doing that. So the idea that just because someone can talk about the game and was a decent pro player, that they're somehow qualified to do Worlds, that sets the bar incredibly low. Because anyone who's going to sit back and go, yeah, but he knows the game and he can talk, like no one knows if he can on Worlds. It's a totally different skill set. People don't seem to get that. It's not about knowing the game. Like there's plenty of people. Think about how many people in the world probably could get a load of the questions on who wants to be a millionaire right. But the problem is, would they get them right when the lights are on them and the pressure's there and they've had to wait 6 out? No, like it's a totally different set of skills that you're testing. And then also, I'll throw in this as well. Even though he builds it up there, like he gives a good example. Like, yeah, it's true in terms of like tenure and experience. Like those guys have it all over him. But the problem I have is this: is first of all, I think it sets a terrible precedent that you can go and leave casting completely and go do a job. You can be a coach, a general manager, assistant, and if things go badly and you just fucking shit the bed and your team doesn't go to Worlds, fuck it, you can just go take active professional people within your former field's jobs and just take their chance at Worlds. I think that's whack, because I can tell you as someone who's done many events, I might have done 60 CSGO lands. Once you're even a couple of months out, you are mad rusty when you come back. Like it probably takes 3 or 4 days to get back into you feeling the flow of like the first days you're thinking like, am I even saying anything interesting or what? You're like your timing's off, you're feeling the flows off, you feeling what you normally would do on a broadcast is off. So to me, the idea that they're going to bring back, like I saw it said on Twitter that that they'd already asked like a Deficio, Papa Smithy or someone. One of those two people said that they'd basically been asked to come back for Worlds now as well. Someone else who hasn't actually been working on the casting side of things. And to me, that is actually really disrespectful, because what it does is it takes the person at their prime and says, oh yeah, you were just, that wasn't based on like hard work or dedication or, research. You're just always that good, mate. And I can just take you out of like mothballs a year later and just put you on Worlds and you'll just be just as good. Like, no, that shows you don't know anything about the fucking broadcast experience, and you definitely don't appreciate your current staff. Because my problem is this: you know what? In past years, when there was only 3 slots for Worlds, and it would often be the obvious ones, it would be like RNG, IG, and EDG, or it'd be like remove IG and put in the third one, WE, for example, right? That's one thing. If at least the caster's doing that, like for example, if you send Papa Smithy, where he used to do the LPL, so he probably knows something about the foundation of the Korean players there and the LPL. But here's the problem: this year of all years is the most unacceptable. I'm telling you right now, I don't give a fuck what they tell you. They can sell you all the wolf tickets they want. None of these motherfuckers watching the LCS and LEC know dog shit about Sunning or LGD. They don't. They're lying to you. They started their work once those playoffs ended. I guarantee you right now. They were praying fucking FPX and IG went as those last 2 teams, because they are out of their depth. And so I don't care if you're the smartest guy in the world. You could be LS. You could be fucking Jat. I mean, no, he's not the broadcast. You could be Monty. Be any of my favorites. You can't make up for the lived experience of having watched 90 games of a team play. Your 2 weeks you do research won't help you. So listen, you might be a better caster, and I'm doing the basics. Like if it's a team like fucking Jing Dong or something you've seen all year long, yeah, you'll do a good job still. But the guy who does the whole year still has like an experience factor that outweighs anyone else, in my opinion. So I don't think they had to have everyone. Certainly these topics are always a popularity contest of like, well, I like this guy, but I prefer this guy. And then everyone masks it as like trying to talk technically about their abilities when hardly anyone can speak about that. But I would just say this: at least from places like LCK and LPL, in my opinion, there should at least be one analyst, at least one analyst, because that's the bare minimum that we need, just from the experience of what those guys showed us for a whole year, in my opinion. Yeah, no, it's definitely like an analyst type thing where I think, okay, if you don't trust them, like, on the live broadcast, why not just bring Lyric here on the analyst desk to break down some of the games or just provide information? I mean, I feel like if anyone who does color commentating for a region, if I get you started on a team, if I'm like, hey, let's talk a little bit about Sunning, you can definitely fill 5 minutes of Sunning if I need it. And you can kind of translate to the fans like what this year progression has been like for the team. And, like that's just something that I feel like the other casters are just going to lack. I mean, I watched all the playoffs for LPL. I watched a few games during the season, but there's no way that I could possibly talk about
LPL and the teams, especially the worst teams, right? LGD and Suning, I think that those two teams are the teams that are going to need the most type of context brought in from the analysts because, people have watched Top. I mean, people catch Top games. I didn't think that LGD was going to make it to Worlds before playoffs happened, right? Like, I was like, oh, I think IG will probably make it. Based on the games I saw, I thought that they were in decent form. So that's where I think it really breaks down when it comes down to like the teams that shouldn't have made Worlds, or at least like coming into playoffs shouldn't have made Worlds. How are those teams going to be presented to the global audience? And right now, let me tell you, like I was watching some like Hotline League and I see the opinions that are coming out into this community.
Mental in that.
Yeah, it's fucking insane. They're saying this is the level of analysis we're getting on talk shows, and these are from fans, but these are like points being discussed. It's like, can Angel actually lane against Jensen? Like, would that actually happen? And it's like, have you watched this guy play, man? Like, this guy is actually insane. So I mean, I just wanted to like kind of like throw it off. The general thing that I'm gonna have a problem with, and the thing that Thor and I'm discussing here is, like, do you think that LPL in terms of knowledge is just going to be underrepresented at this World Championship?
Like, yes and no, because I obviously agree with the fact that, right, like, no amount of research really can make up for the fact of that I've just seen, like 100 games of all these teams. But I don't, maybe I'm just putting, like the blind faith in. Obviously, I'm an LPL caster, like I have ties to Riot, but I at least have faith that people like, like Frost and like Spawn are going to do their due diligence. And I know for a fact Raz has watched every game of LPL, but kind of tangenting a little bit off your last topic about like Suning and LGD especially being underrepresented. You can especially see that in like the takes on these teams, even on like Reddit, where people are either extremely low on them and think, like you said, like Angel's going to get wrecked by Jensen, or even the opposite. I see some people coming in way too hot on like LGD and Suning, saying like, oh, these teams, going to semifinals, maybe make finals. And I'm just like, I don't know if you guys been watching LPL, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Do you think that that's actually like out of the realm of possibility, especially considering the easy group that Suning has? Because I think that Suning, I don't think that like either team is going to make finals. I don't think LGD or Suning is going to make finals, but I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Suning made it to semis, because they have an easy group, right? You look at Group A, I can see them topping that group. G2 has not been specifically hot right now, and then also just knowing how G2 performs in groups, it could be weird. I mean, you could end up with a matchup like, Suning versus Fnatic, or, even Suning versus LGD could be a possibility coming into like quarters, right? So do you think that like Suning just like doesn't really have a shot at making semis? Do you think that this team has like some blaring weaknesses?
I think the fact that they got an easy group is kind of what's going to screw them over at the end, because the fact that they have an easy group means in quarters they could potentially face JDG, Domwad, TES. I even think DRX and Gen.G could be tough matchups for them. I honestly think they need to hope, like, luck out that they get one of the teams from Group C. But yeah, I think the fact that this group should be free, like, we're assuming Right Team Liquid slots in here. I think they can top the group from what I've seen from G2, but okay, then like JDG ends up second in their group and you face JDG. I'm just like, well, rest in peace, Suning.
Yeah. No, that's definitely the scary thing there. In terms of like LGD on that front, like how do you think that they actually match up in Group C? Because that's the team that I'm the most scared of coming in for LPL. I mean, obviously they're coming in as last seed, but just the way that they play, I feel like it could be potentially exploitable, especially through like topside. So like how confident do you feel in like LGD potentially being able to make it out of groups?
So I'll kind of start off building into it, because I didn't expect this team to make Worlds at all. I think they came into playoffs as one of our weakest teams, like easily. They got so lucky, in my opinion, they got matched against WE in first round, because stylistically they counter them so well with the fact that Teacher Mod WE's mid laner is absolutely terrible, and LGD's strongest point is mid jungle. And then even when I look at their run, they only beat two teams to get to Worlds, actually. They beat WE and they beat IG twice. And beating IG twice should be considered an accolade, but I mean, all three of us saw IG's games, right? Like that was, I don't feel like beating that IG team actually meant anything. But going into this group, I feel so good for LGD. I was so afraid for them, because when you look at the teams in their group, TSM, Fnatic especially, in my opinion, LGD's biggest strength, like I just said, is playing through mid jungle. They're very strong in the early game, especially like enabling Peanut. I think Peanut is kind of ignoring their series against Suning and some of their drafts, which I think were really questionable. I think he has such a good sense for like finding opportunities, especially around mid and bot, and enabling Xie to get off on the map, start snowballing Kramer, and then kind of become this big team fight monster. I think TSM is kind of just the worst LGD in my opinion. And it's different in the sense that they transfer their mid jungle pressure to top side, but I don't think Broken Blade's really going to be able to pressure Longxing. Longxing has spent all year long facing Zoom, facing the Shy, facing 369. I think he absorbs pressure pretty well in the early game. I think it's in mid game when he starts having a lot of issues. And then we look at Fnatic, and it's like, man, Selfmade and Nemesis don't do anything together. It looks like these guys don't even want to play together, which is so strange since
they're like best friends.
They come from like the same team before as well, right?
Mm-hmm. They played Mad Lions in an amateur, like when they were playing in the Spanish league. They were on that team. These guys, like, I think that's the main connection that got Selfmade into Fnatic, was like Nemesis just wanted to play with him. I mean, they duoed hundreds of games in season 9. But yeah, you can continue with your point. Just wanted to add some context,
dude. But that blows my mind because again, watching their finals, it's like, and even watching some of the other playoff series, they don't do anything together. And then when you look at the other lanes for Fnatic, it's like, I think Bwipo had a pretty good playoffs, and I like Bwipo as a player, but
same.
My problem with Fnatic is I try to like come up with, like at least like a short synopsis of how to define a team's play style. Again, like whether you want to see like mid-jungle early pressure, snowballing that like into Drakes or playing through side lanes, whatever. Fnatic, I don't know how to define the way they play. It just looks so like sporadic, so all over the place. It looks like they just need to hope that Selfmade can kind of make something happen in the enemy jungle, or one of Hylissang's roams like go off really nice on something like the Pike, and then they can snowball that. So I think that lack of identity like really screws them in this group. And then that kind of leads LGD versus Gen G, where I actually think Gen G can beat them. Gen G plays a much slower style. I think they're the slowest LCK team, and I think LGD really struggles against teams like that. I think despite the fact that LGD are very proactive, like in the first 10 minutes, they were one of our worst teams at transitioning past mid-game. So once the first 3 outer turrets are down, LGD kind of default to that, I'll kind of say NA style, where you're just waiting for the Drakes to spawn and then like kind of posturing around it in an indecisive fashion. And I mean, if the enemy team engages on you, you just completely lose your mind. So I think LGD has a good chance in this group. I think it should be them and Gen G. TSM, man, NA.
It's
I don't even know what to say.
It's really hard to like rate an A. I mean, so I've been branded now as like an NA hater, and that's something that I'm just living with. And I think it might be true because every single group that I'm going into at Worlds, it's hard for me to predict any NA team like not getting 4th. Like if I look at Group A, maybe I could say Team Liquid is better than Machi, and that's having not watched Machi at all. That's just based on other people telling me that PCS is shit, right? So yeah, like maybe I put some time into Machi and see like what my actual take is, but maybe TL could be like 3rd in that group. In this group, like I don't know how I can not put TSM, like even though I want TSM to get out, obviously, and I think that'd be a great storyline because right now the game is just dead in our region in terms of hype, right? And I think that's partly on content creators not hyping it. It's partly on just the region's performance being so abysmal. It's partly on the fact that solo queue is just so bad and people don't really want to play here. High ping, all these problems that we always go into. But I just don't see a world where I can't slot TSM into the 4th spot into that group. Like who can you predict to do worse than TSM based on their region's performance? Like it's hard for me to say that LGD is going to perform worse than TSM. Like I don't think that's like a possibility for me personally.
The thing I'll give TSM is I actually do think they can sneak wins in this group because I think LGD had so many like abysmal drafts and abysmal like things like level 1s going like not their way. I remember especially the Lilia game, even the game 2 in that series where they were the ones invading and Xie flashed, and I think Sorta got so lucky with his Guardian proc, but then it's like Xie was forced under his turret the whole game. They picked Skarner blind, which allowed SOFM to have the Olaf, and they just got completely destroyed. And they had so many games like that where it's like, okay, well, you kind of screwed yourself from draft. Some shenanigans happen level 1, and now Peanut and Xie can't get rolling, and you just lose. So I don't expect TSM to go winless in this group. Yeah, I actually think, this was like the best group for them, honestly. Like, it's kind of funny that I agree with you. I totally see all the NA teams bottoming their groups, but this was definitely NA's best draw, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The only thing is, though, like, I am amazed how many Fnatic and TSM fans thought, like, even, like, on one hand, people were trying to say this was, like, a group of death, which is, like, I don't know if it is, because, like, I don't know how people define
Hell
how it is.
no.
It's supposed to be where, like, all the teams can get out, which, like, that doesn't even make sense for this group. But if you just mean it's a strong group, I sort of get it. Like, yeah, in theory, there's no free games in the group. But, like, if you're a Fnatic and TSM fan, what are you cheering for? Like, you've just been given two of the teams that have really strong fucking jungle mid, you morons. Have you not been watching your teams play all year long? That is the recipe to your fucking demise. So, like, the only world I can see where TSM isn't fourth is where Fnatic just implodes even further. Like, listen, Whipple can be the best of one. Like, they can fuck that shit up for sure. So, I will say that the reason anyone in theory has a chance to get out is just that, like, since there are no free games, that's where, like, if you're Gen G, you can just, like, go 3-0, but then you slip up one time against, like, Fnatic in one game, and suddenly that opens a door to someone else has a win. You know, you can have some weird scenarios like that. Mm-hmm. To me, I actually think it's like, if you want a real chance, it's actually probably the one that Dom said about if Team Liquid was in Group A. Because first of all, there's the matchy angle. And then there's also the fact that Suning's like mainly rookies. Like most of those players have never played on this level before. Mm-hmm. Rookies can implode. They can just have a bad fucking tournament. The pressure can get to them. Like it's not an impossible scenario. The problem is though, even if somehow in that scenario you came second in that group, no one's going to give you any credit for it. Like everyone's just going to say, who gives a fuck? So I don't just do this, Dom. But this way, what you've got to do, mate, is if you actually care about that topic, I know you don't, you're just referencing it because people are bringing it up. Mm-hmm. But if you actually care about the idea that people think you're biased, just do what I do when they do it as a journalist, right? Where they say that me and Richard Lewis and all these other people, that we're just biased journalists who hate the orgs. I just say, okay, compared to who? And there's never going to be an answer coming down the pipeline, by the way, because the logic is, since they're fanboys who can't handle the idea that you don't praise their favorite player, anyone who doesn't praise their favorite player is a hater. So there is no journalist who's unbiased. So same scenario. Think about this, Dom. Think about the world of content creation. So we're simultaneously told that we're just sellout shills who have no real opinions and just say things only to create controversy and clickbait, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we're really unliked because we criticize NA and say it isn't good. Right, put the 2 and 2 together, you dumb fucks. Where's the guy who's super popular, who just praises NA and explains really logically with great analytical points how TSM would get out of groups? Because, spoiler, he'd be the most popular person in the entire fucking world of League of Legends. He would literally be #1 ratings. Think about it, right? He'd be the equivalent of, like, Fox News, wouldn't he? He'd just be playing hard into that base of people who desperately want to hear what he's saying, and he would literally just be he'd have 10 times the viewers we have, wouldn't he, Don? The whole point is that literally, guys, think about this, TSM fans. This is a 1-second intervention. There is not a single knowledgeable person in the entire English-speaking world of League of Legends who actually thinks your team is good. That's how fucking bad it is. That's where we're at. You are the fucking guy in the Joker movie before he actually decided to take action. That's you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is the players can be good within the context of NA. Like, I don't think that NA ever really loses because our players are just so individually outmatched that we can't compete with other teams. The reason that my analysis comes down to, like, these teams not getting out of groups is because when I look at other teams' like setups and I just think about how teams work, right? And I think about what's repeatable on stage, right? Because when you're going into a match like that, like, I know the feeling, right? The more like tools in your arsenal, the more like pillars of your gameplay that you can fall back on, the better your team is going to be. So on teams, so for example, with JDG, one of the reasons I rate them so highly, like I think JDG is actually the second strongest team coming into this tournament over Damwon. I'm going to have them over Damwon coming out of Group B. And part of the reason is their support jungle synergy is so insane. If you watch how these guys play, they're so in sync with like their base timings. Like these are things that are hard to get down. I mean, it sounds like really simple, right? Oh, just base around the same time. Well, you have to like match your jungle clear. You have to be talking about, okay, what camps is Kanavi going to do? When are they going to push the wave in? When are they going to get good resets? And if you watch these guys play together, right? You watch Lamau and Kanavi play together, the way that they like are so in tune with like, okay, we back on the same time. That we walk to the enemy jungle, we drop our deep wards, we drop our pinks, we reset back into lane, we collapse for the dragon on the next push. Like, it's so textbook that when you put that against a team that just doesn't have those pillars, they're not going to be able to compete because they don't even get a chance to use their mechanical ability. Like, they're just going to be outmatched from the get-go because the setups are just on such a higher level. So that's part of the reason why I think LPL is actually so strong right now.
Yeah, I agree. And even going back to your guys' last point, I think it made me realize something that, you guys are, biased against NA, but I feel like all the people saying that, right, they only watch NA, to where both of you guys follow LEC, LCK, LPL. Like, I guess if you only watch NA, you could probably, maybe in your mind, somehow mentally justify that, you know, there's some hope this year, but
yeah,
here's the thing, Eric. It's basically what they're doing is the fan version of what I've actually had pro players try and do to me. I'll give them a shout out even. It was actually Cersei, the fucking OG jungler, formerly of... What team was the one before that? Splice, there we go. So two of the teams that were the most boring fucking teams of all time. So when this guy came on my talk show with Veteran, right, instead of just copping to the idea of like, which by the way would be the cool angle, where you go sort of PoE style, what you say is, well, I just have a different vision of the game than you guys. You know, I'm picking these champions because I see the game differently. And, you know, like I see win conditions and where my spike's going to be in the game differently. So I'm just like setting my items up. So, you know, I'm not doing it the way that you guys do in Orthodox style, but, you know, I acknowledge Orthodox play exists. I'm just going to say I exist outside of it. He tried to do the fucking like gaslight approach where he was just like, but Thorin, if you were looking at an LCK team who played slowly like they do and punish mistakes, wouldn't you praise them? But when I do it, it's like, you're doing nothing. Like, shut up. You're not doing that. Like, if we stop that guy and last in his brain, he'd be going like, well, the coach said the pathing for the level 4 guy. You're just going like, it's nice to be fed before I go into a fight. Like, you don't do any of that shit. Like, it's totally different. Like, yes, if I took a frame and I sort of looked through fucking, I don't know, Loco's old glasses, like, fucking hell. Like, maybe it'd like a squint and it could look like vaguely similar. But every meaningful piece of context is so different, isn't it? So basically what they do is they get mad, right, that they watch LCS only and everyone's going, it's just a bloody ARAM Clown Fiesta. And then what happens is if they tune in and watch a game of like LPL, they see like an amazing skirmish, and cause to them, they think it's the same shit. It's just a bunch of people just fighting for no reason in the jungle. When you guys are then going like, amazing fight, and the way he pulled up, they're going, it's just bloody biased. They're just because they're Chinese, they're saying it's good. It's like, no, there actually is a qualitative difference, a very important one, guys.
I think the
We're
thing
not
that
making it up. It's not a conspiracy. Put it out. It's not a conspiracy.
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy, and I think the thing that you have to look at when it comes to like all these situations is like the way that the fight is created. Whereas like in NA you see like a lot of like basic mistakes where it's like, oh, this guy just didn't like recognize the prior, he didn't understand that support could roam on this timing, like he didn't calculate the support basing, like all that stuff. And then you look at like some of the other fights that are forced, and there are like some bloodbaths in LPL where it's like, all right, this is just fighting for no, this is just like some fucking like limit testing type shit, and you have to accept that, right? But then there's also like a lot of fights that are forced based off like vision denial and like pockets that are created by really, really, really good fucking play, and that's part of the reason why JDG is so good around Kanavi. I feel like Kanavi, for this team, he's so good about like. I don't even know if it's him calling for it or if it's his team knowing how to play around him, but it seems like the team operates so well around his pathing, right? Like knowing when he wants to ward, he has a buddy warding with him. When he wants to gank top, the wave is always in a good position to gank top. It always seems to synergize perfectly with what he's doing, and that's like why this guy is so great. So, you know, when you see these types of teams, it's the reason why people are like, hey, Rogue can't get out. Because it would really take, like, it's not like Rogue can play 10% better than they normally play and get out. They have to play like 50 to 70% better than they normally play in order to get out individually to make up for the drastic differences that are going to come in based on like the setups and like the vision that other teams are able to like create on the map and like the way that these teams approach the game. Like they have such an advantage because it's like, hey, you outplay one guy once, nice, man. They're still going to be able to like go back to like doing their stuff. Like you have to outplay them multiple times until you're strong enough that none of that shit matters anymore. So
yeah, that's the thing I think about JDG, and just I think all the top teams at this tournament, even Domwon and TS kind of, but is they can just replicate it. I remember there's one game against LGD that it just had like the most fluid map movement. They kept doing over and over again. It was where like Luma was on Bard, I think Yagao was on Galio, and we just see Yagao and Kanavi Luma and Kanavi sync up so well, get red wards in the enemy blue side jungle. Yagao's already moving to help Kanavi contest Raptors, zooms on Ornn moving down to start Herald. It's like everything is such like a well-oiled machine. And again, that can happen for any team. Like I'm sure TSM has some plays that are like that. The thing is, like, do you understand that type of play and can you replicate it consistently? Because teams like JDG can.
Yeah, they definitely can. When it comes down to I guess to bring it back into Group C, when it comes down to LGD, are there any like big weaknesses that you think like what is the angle for these teams to outperform? Because one of the ones that you kind of touched on that I wanted to push a little bit more on is maybe like the Broken Blade versus Longqing angle, because when you look at how they interact, right? Broken Blade is an extremely like lane dominant player, and he seems like even if players are really talented, his strength is like the first like 4 or 5 levels in lane. Like this guy gets solo kills on solo kills. And one thing that I've noticed from Longqing, and I've discussed with Peter Dunn as well, is like if he gets behind, it seems like he just doesn't have the same like knowledge as other top laners in terms of like what to do like in like the mid game. Once the turret drops, it seems like if you spawn Herald top in LGD's top lane, he's just gonna sit there and watch that motherfucking turret die. He's just gonna stand there and be like, all right, I'm at my tier 2. I am waiting for the wave to crash, right? So I mean, I think that lit up your eyes a little bit. So just like give us some information on like if that's an angle.
I actually even remember the game that I'm pretty sure you're talking about, because I can't remember who they were facing, but Longqing is sitting under his inhibitor turret while whatever team was using Rift Herald on his tier 2. It's like, no, it's tier 1. It actually made no sense. But I don't think Longqing will get punished in lane by Broken Blade. And I don't even expect that Spica and Bjergsen should be even able to like make those roams to set that up. But for me, LGD in the mid game, like they don't know what to do, especially if TSM do play around that top side, because like you said, Longqing's not really good at knowing like, okay, hey, my team's making this play on bot, they're making a play on top. I'm gonna like either go cover mid, maybe hover, get some wards to like catch TSM's transition. He doesn't do any of that. And even LGD as a whole, I think are extremely indecisive when it comes to fighting at Dragon. I don't think Mark is very good at initiating team fights. I think they really heavily rely on Longqing. So especially him getting that pick like in Ornn, and him being in like an even or neutral place so he can, get to the fight at a good time. They have the setup. I think teams can really punish that. I think Mark has shown a lot that if he's on like something like Leona or Nautilus, which is obviously really common in LPL, he's willing to pull the trigger a bit too soon. And if Longqing's not there, I just see so many times where LGD just kind of like postures and they allow the enemy team to engage on them, which obviously, if the enemy team's engaging on you, you theoretically shouldn't have as good of an angle to fight and you could lose out. So I think if TSM can like neutralize LGD's early game, I don't think LGD are that smart of a team, honestly.
Yeah. How do you feel about like the carry threats going into late game? Because that was one of the things that I kind of like identified. I feel like GA is best on obviously like the TF seemed like his best pick in playoffs, but he's best on those types of picks. But when you put him on like something like an Orianna, I kind of lose confidence in his ability to like full carry a team fight compared to like some of the better players in LPL. So for example, if we get into a late game situation, obviously Rookie's just a better player than GA, right? But if we get into a late game situation and you put them both on Orianna, I would have much more confidence in Rookie being able to like play the fight mechanically perfect or like not get cut. It feels like GA kind of has that like uncertainty where it's like, oh, he might get hit by a skill shot and get one shot, or he'll carry the fight, There is that vulnerability there. So like, do you think that maybe the angle is you just try to ban out like roaming champions, you ban out the Galio, you ban out the TF, and you try to attack, you try to make the game more like stable and you stall out the game versus LGD? Is that like the approach you think would be best?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I agree with what you said. I don't think Xie is as proficient on like scaling control mages as he is on things like Twisted Fate. I think his Silas is also super good. In spring this year, he was one of our players that was playing a ton of like assassins, wanted to find those flanks, get on the back line. So I think depending on the meta for Worlds, especially with all the teams scrimming right now, because in other regions I saw like LEC, LCS, even LCK were playing so much like Azir and things like that. We didn't have any of that in LPL. And if it turns out, like scrimming against these teams, that's like the theoretically better style to play. Yeah, I think LGD will struggle.
Yeah, interesting.
I don't think there's a world where that happens though. Like, I think Chinese teams would just go their own way anyway on that one.
I agree.
Force a different style, like just don't play around fucking mid or something stupid like that. Maybe just roll 24/7. They would just do something different, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, one angle that I feel like happens in LPL is like the reason why people don't pick Azir is like they're at least in spring. I felt like there was a lot more Kassadin that you saw in LPL compared to like other regions. Like they're just not afraid to like pick, hey, you pick Azir, okay, Kassadin's a counter to Azir. The first couple of levels are bad. Once we get 6, this matchup is fine. And they'll just pick things like that. So I just don't know if that'll be like if you want to even go.
That's why these discussions about laners just become so worthless when the person's only watched LCS and LEC, because they start talking about stuff like you were saying earlier, like they'll start talking about Langshung, right, and be like, oh, what can he possibly do? Like, he's not as good as the other best players in all of the LPL. It's like, first of all, like that guy when he was like Zhao was considered like one of the up and coming like superstar players, along with people like Zoom. He was right there with him in the same way as Yagao was thought to be with Knight before they kind of separated off. I'd say the analogy's even pretty solid. So the problem I have is, again, what's the comparison here? Like, oh, they weren't the absolute best players against the absolute best players in the whole world. It's like, well, how can we fairly compare that against Jensen playing against fucking Paul Belter and CLG? Like, you know, that is like the most apples and oranges comparison. So the problem I have is like, I like the way you did it there. Like, how would he carry the team fight? That's quite a good angle, because then at least we know like which teams are good at team fighting in the group and stuff. But like, I think most of the laner matchups that people try to do fall apart completely. Like, actually, one thing, when I went back and watched the VOD that LS was talking about, one thing I would agree with him is, if people are actually saying that, like, Cos Caps was the MVP of Europe, he's better than, like, BDD, it's like, no. I'll wait and see that actually get proven first, please. Not just winning, like, half a dozen best of ones against a mixed bag of European mids. Like, this guy was winning best of threes constantly, against some of the best teams in the world. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not even a fair comparison. The problem is, in the West, like, because we are trying to not be biased and be like, right, just because you're in LCS doesn't mean you're shit. You could still be an amazing standout player. Unfortunately, it is hard to translate that from, right, now here's your highlight package, beating up on players we acknowledge aren't good. And now we're going to compare that with a guy who played 3 times more games. And if someone's a hater, they can just pick all the bad games he had. It's like that whole like fucking argument I was having about like Gilius. It's like, how could Gilius be the MVP if he objectively didn't play 6 games? That means take the next best MVP candidate, take their 6 worst games, right? Well, they beat Gilius in all 6 of those. There we go. That's how you have to start the discussion. Like, how are we going to have these discussions? So to me, the whole like laner thing, I think Western fans are mad underrating a lot of the Asian players in that regard. Like, I'm not going to go the opposite way and say, like, for example, like, all of Sunning's players are going to be geniuses. No, but like, you got to give them sort of a base level of credit that, listen, mate, if you can make it for Worlds out of LPL and LCK right now, you do come in with a higher base level expectation than anyone from the West. I don't care if it's G2.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to tie it back into like the Group C situation, when you see like just the way that some of the laners play, like I think Nemesis, obviously, I think his champion pool is bigger than actually just Orianna Lucian, right? Like, I'm not saying that he's actually a fucking 2-trick, but he got exploited in this finals, right? You ban Orianna Lucian, he is blind picking Corki. That shit will not, the same way it didn't fly versus Caps, that shit is not going to fly versus teams like LGD. Because even if Jie is not the same type of player as Caps, where he's going to solo kill you 100 times and he's going to pick like, assassins, or he's going to play like Syndra and just like dominate the lane like that, the amount of pressure that you're going to give up in the map is going to create so many opportunities for dives. And I mean, one thing that I've seen playing or just watching,
tie the same concept into the TSM angle, like all those hilarious, like, haha, look, blind fucking TF and Zilean, go ahead and do that against all the LG, do that against the LCK and also LPL teams, because there's going to be a bad fucking laning phase for you if you do.
Sure.
Because actually, to tie into what you're saying, Dom, that's the other difference in those leagues. In the West, it always goes like this. Oh, technically, Echo's like a counter to a Zay, but only if you can play it. I can't play it, so let's just not play it or pick something else. In LPL and LCK, they just go, right, open up the fucking enormous Rolodex of counters. Right, I'll play these 4. But we're going to ban that. Like, they just pick one. They just always have one. Like, mate, go and look. If anyone's a fan of, like, mid lanes, for example, just go and have a look at an LPL mid lane and how many champions they'll have played if they're one of the ones that made it to Worlds. I guarantee the minimum's, like, 12 champions over this place. Like, there are no 2-tricks in these regions. They don't exist. They don't make it Worlds, at least. Put it that way. There we go. That's a fairer way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to the Nemesis point that I was going on, just mainly just speaking about like how Chinese players play, even if you just look at their server, right? You observe their solo queue. This region is so much more about like level 4-man dives, things like that, map movement. So if you try to take the approach of like, hey, we're just going to AFK mid lane, we're going to farm up, and we're just going to like leave our sides to just do whatever, like you are getting 4-man dive, you are getting 5-man dove. Like these types of plays are happening. So how are you going to be able to come back from that? But I mean, I think that one of the things that I'll push back on there is like things like Zilean. I feel like the fact that Bjergsen plays Zilean at such a higher level than like other people that they might have seen, or like, you know, there hasn't been any Zilean in LPL, right? I feel like because people might not fully understand the champ, that could be one of the angles that TSM uses to be able to get out of groups. Like if they are able to get some of these comfort picks that they are like exceptionally good on, and they're able to identify, hey, this is like how we play, and you really put the onus on the other team to counter it and really abuse the weak spots of the champion. If the enemy teams are not able to actually like properly identify those and like get big enough leads, I feel like that's one of the angles. Like if TSM is underestimated on things like Zilean, because we even saw it from players like PoE, you know, like everyone has a different approach of how you beat Zilean. It's like, do you smash it in lane? Do you pick something to scale? Like, do you just try to like, you know, ignore it and dive? Like, can you hard abuse it? People don't really know exactly how to interact with the champion because not that many people play it. And especially not many people have as much experience on it as somebody like Bjergsen, you know, like this is somebody who, you know, even in the famous fucking double lift highlight where he's dashing into the victor like 5 years ago or whatever the fuck that was, season 6 world championship, you know, Bjergsen's on the Zilean. So this guy has so much experience on the champion that I feel like that could be one of the things that, you know, we see TSM using to get out. I'm actually really interested to see if we end up just getting like 1, 2, 3 Zilean bans against TSM. Do you have any?
I think,
yeah, go for it.
I think it'll definitely work like once, especially we were saying, hey, if you can kind of get through that early game against LGD, you can probably have a pretty good chance against him in mid game, and especially once Zilean gets a few levels in his bombs, right? You just start like perma clearing waves. It's pretty much impossible to kill him. I think it'll be something that could potentially work against LGD, but it's also the type of thing where, like Thorin said, I feel like LPL mid laners play so many like even obscure champions that he'll pick Zilean, and then maybe Shie pulls out some kind of like random assassin that could just stomp him in lane. I don't know if they would do that the first time, because like you're saying, I agree. I think TSM picks Zilean, and as LGD, you're like, oh my god, we haven't played against Zilean. What's good against this? Maybe the coach says, hey, like let's not worry about it. Let's just pick for our comp, and then you know that could be a potential avenue for TSM to find a win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
My problem with that logic, though, Dom, is that you have to have someone for Zilean to use all the shit on, mate. So who else in the game is going to be fed to the point that he can then actually use his abilities on them?
Oh, well, I feel like that has to be a BB. Like, the thing about BB...
Yeah, logically, yeah. But I mean, that we need 2 win conditions now. We need Bjergsen to be competent on the Zilean and not just get wrecked in lane. Mm-hmm. And then we need someone else to be big enough he can actually make them win the game.
Well, I feel
the thing I'll give that is I don't think, like let's say Broken Blade just blind picks any carry top laner. Longxing doesn't really play like counter picks. He's just going to pick something like an Ornn, like a Mordekaiser, and he probably will just absorb it. So I feel like there is like the potential for success. Okay. So TSM fans, you know, I'm on your side.
Okay. All right.
This guy become that guy I was talking about earlier. So this is how I get on the worlds, right?
Let's go.
Yeah, no, that's actually
a hero.
Yeah, just I hope that we have some you know, some writers watching my content still. I mean, they're probably watching it for the wrong reasons, but maybe they like Lyric at least, even if they fucking hate me. So who knows? Yeah, I mean, one thing that we can talk about is just like underrated players throughout LPL, because a lot of people aren't familiar. I mean, everyone knows about Knight, everyone knows about Kanavi. Well, most people that have like, you know, tried to educate themselves.
Got quite a lot of hype.
Yeah.
He's MVP.
Are there any like players that you think are really, really stand out? I know we had Munchables on the show. He talked a lot about Bin. Like Bin had like the most solo kills out of all top laners, or like, I think out of all players in LPL, which is a fucking insane stat when you think about it, because LPL is just like all about fighting, right? So are there any players that you come into this world championship from LPL that you're just like, hey, these guys are mad underrated right now?
Look, so first I got to give a special honorable mention to someone who didn't make it. Rest in peace, Rookie.
Yep.
You were one of the best players in LPL, and we all miss you. But for me, I'd probably say 369 for Western fans, because I don't think a lot of people really know 369, and I actually think 369 should be in the conversation for best top laner. I don't think it's just clear-cut Zoom. I think 369 is much more of a versatile player. It could just be how the team plays, obviously, because JDG obviously tailored their playstyle to Kanavi. Mm-hmm. But the fact that 369 can do things like counter pick with the Jax, completely take over a game, can play the Ornn, is a great team fighter, a great frontliner, great at creating zones. He can be self-sufficient. He can run away with an advantage. Like, this guy is so insane. It's only his second year in LPL. He was a rookie last split. Top got pretty far last year as well, despite having like a pretty weak team. Mm-hmm. So I think people should come in with the expectation that like, hey, I don't expect anyone to run over 369. I don't care if it's Zoom. I don't care if it's Nuggery. Like, this guy's legit. And the other one for me is Huanfeng, the AD carry from Suning. He might not be at the level of someone like Jackie Love, as we saw in the
Suning. He got smashed in that series. Like, he got dicked.
Yeah. It was not fun, but like a cool fact about him actually was he actually came from the IG LDL system. So he trained under Jackie Love last year. These are two players that are very familiar. And he's a player I think all of us, like all of the LPL casters, expect to become a future superstar. You can see he's very versatile champion pool. In spring, he was like the hard carry, was playing like the Aphelios, the Ezreal, and taking over games by himself. You can see now he might be the best Jhin player in the LPL. His Ashe is really proficient. This is just a guy who's so young. I know Munchables mentioned on your guys' show earlier about his backstory being like really tragic. He was actually like abandoned at the age of 13 and had to like go through a bunch of trials and tribulations. You guys can look up that story and, read it. But yeah,
Huanfeng fucking stealing double lift storyline there. I see what they do, the Chinese knockoffs. So I keep on that.
But yeah, I think Huanfeng will be pretty good. And just the fact that he's with Sword Art, like I think Sword Art's good, but
I think Sword Art's not good.
Well, I was gonna say I don't think Sword Art's anywhere near the level he was on Flash Wolves. I feel like, especially mechanically, man. My God. Yeah, and
this is the problem. Think about it. This is where narratives actually do ruin the game, unfortunately. Because Sword Art is the only big name on the Suning lineup. People's logic is, right, well, he must be the reason they're good. It's like, no, that's actually, it's not, it's the opposite. He's not terrible, but like, he is far and away nowhere. No one considers him the best support in the LPL, put that way. Like, and even on this team, it's actually mainly other, like Britisway. The way no one thinks he's at his prime individually is people just compliment him with euphemisms like he's bringing a veteran element to the
they're
team.
like, look at how happy he is.
This is what matters. Yeah, exactly. Like, that means you're just not the best player, isn't it? Yeah. That's why I think most of Suning's underrated. Like you said it earlier, mate. Angel is definitely underrated. Like, listen, if you think of LPL mid lanes, yeah, you're going to think of guys who just take over the game and smash everyone. Listen, he's playing the boring mages, but he's fucking good at it. There's a reason he's at Worlds. He didn't slip over and accidentally qualify over all the like fucking monsters like the Rookie, etc. Like, so I think people will be surprised by the level of some of these players for sure.
Yeah. I also want to add, at least for Angel, it's kind of funny that he's on like that control mage, just catch waves duty now, because in spring, he was the guy pulling out all the assassins. In spring, I'm pretty sure Kassadin was undefeated in something like 8 games. He was blind picking 8 games of Kassadin. So.
Just think about that. Like, think about that in the context of like other regions. 8 games of Kassadin. We see 1 game of Kassadin, maybe like a split in NA. So,
dude, Kassadin is an early game skirmisher in LPL. I swear to God, every time we saw Kassadin, he had like 2 or 3 kills at like 10 minutes. And yeah, the game was always over.
Oh, one thing
that's one area though that I actually think is probably also misunderstood going into the world. So I want to get your take on it. You alluded to it earlier, but you just referenced it in the context of the playoffs with LGD, right? One of the things that I think people really need to look out for at Worlds is that's also why, in my opinion, the meta of which champions are picked is so different in China. It's because it's just default that they're going for bonkers level 1s where you just do like ridiculous fights and invades. So like if you have a champion that like this is supposed to have a bad early game, but he has 1 kill just to start the laning phase, that changes the game completely. Like some of the other regions, dude, when I was watching some of the LCS playoffs, I was like, so they're all just agreeing to essentially just go to the lanes. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, they're not going to gamble anything, even as the underdog. Like, I think that's an area where the Western teams have to really prepare.
Yeah, and I think that's one of
standard setups.
And
that's going to be a normal.
That's
game.
one of the reasons why TSM won, because TSM was one of the only teams that was actually willing to do stuff early game. And we
actually impressed some of the LPL analysts that I was talking to. Some of that.
Yeah, like they actually did things like, I mean, there's things that are standard now, right? If you pick Lilia, you're going to go for that level 1 Wraith invade. You're going to flip the whole game there because you just have such an advantage. Like, you can pretty much do the Wraiths before the enemy team can do their red buff, and then you just start the fight level 2 and auto win. So there is definitely like some of like the things that are more standardized, but TSM was willing to do them, right? And we just saw how bad LCS teams in general react to invades. Everyone remembers the Cloud9 game, right? Cloud9 when they played into FlyQuest, and you know, Lilia invades, Blabber dies as Nocturne level 1 trying to fight over the Wraiths, goes to his blue buff, dies level 2 fighting over the blue buff, and it's like, okay, whole game's over, just go next game. You start 0-1 in the series because of that. Teams are not used to this level of aggression. Like, LPL teams, like, if they have 1 advantage, they'll fight you. They'll be like, oh, well, we have Graves and the other guy has has like Rek'Sai or something, well, they just don't get to play the game level 1 then. Like, this guy has to give up his whole red side jungle and start on his wolves, or the game is doomed. So I think there's like a lot of stuff to unpack. When we were talking about Kassadin, one thing I wanted to ask you is this is just like kind of an aside. We jump off this really quickly. But one of the builds that is super popular in solo queue that I've seen, like it seems like every Kassadin does right now, watching the super servers, there's this build where they always go Seraphs into like Frozen Heart, Randuin's like tank Kassadin. Was tank Kassadin ever a thing in LPL, or was it just like always full AP?
It was the only one who would do it. I think sometimes like sparingly by tank items was Doinb. No one else did it, but he does it on everything.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, no, not really a thing.
What's your rating of Doinb? Like, I mean, obviously he's eliminated, but I just still want to like, you know, contextualize how this guy who is considered just so great by everyone else, you know, everyone expected him to come back to Worlds. Obviously, previous world champion in 2019. Like, where was like the fall off here? Like, do you think Doinb was just like, you know, slightly overrated? Do you think it was the fact that they played so many games with Khan? Like, where did FPX, you know, really lose it?
I actually might have a surprising take that I think he's pretty underrated. Not, I guess maybe not for fans like of last year, because they might just remember, oh, world champion, but last year his laning phase was such a meme, and last year's laning phase was pretty bad, but I think Doinb in lane this year got so much better. And on FPX, he was the only member on this team. It wasn't like rookie levels of 1v9, but like their bot lane was so horrible. You can see Tien didn't adapt well to the meta. It looked like there was potentially like internal issues. The stuff with Khan, it really felt like Doinb was just kind of on an island by himself, watching his team collapse around him. But I feel like for FPX as a whole, they did waste too much time trying to incorporate Khan. I remember we talked about this on Summoning Insight, me, you, Monty, Thorin, that you know, even on paper, it just didn't really make sense as a move. That bringing in a new player, completely fine. If they brought in someone like Morgan from WE, or if they wanted someone like Longxing, right, it makes sense. Yes. But they're going to switch up their whole style, bring in Khan. It really showed the laning like problems that their bot lane has, because my God, those guys were getting 2v2 killed a lot, especially in spring. We saw Chris wasn't able to have the same kind of impact without Tien kind of like helping unlock them from lane. And it looks like FPX just got kind of flustered, and they kept switching back and forth all the way pretty much until summer playoffs. So I don't really know what this team was supposed to do.
Yeah, to me, like the key thing you just said there, it's one thing if you brought Khan in it just failed, right? That could happen. Okay. Obviously, SK Telecom thought they were going to transform him and change him a different kind of player. But my problem is what you just said there. It's that what they would do, both splits, is they would just go, right, we're going to do this approach. Fuck, that's really not working. Just switch back. And they would just keep doing it over. And then when they got to the playoffs, right, or in the semifinals, like, didn't work, right, for the third place game, switching back. So which is this? Like, it's got to be one or the other. Like, you got to commit to it if you really, like, if you have a vision, show us the vision. You can't keep going between the two. Then the other part is, like you were saying there, it's one of those examples where it's not like one person played worse. That team was already a finely constructed machine. Like, it was how Doinb worked with the jungler, which then connected to the support, who were like the two key pieces. So when the jungler falls apart, and he looked way worse even in spring, and then the bot lane generally was a non-factor. They have nothing. And then they don't even have the support of top laner because they've switched out to Khan. Like, at that point, you've just got Doinb with all of his weaknesses on display, none of his strengths being used. And I didn't even agree with it. He wasn't even that terrible as a mid lane. It's just the whole point of having Doinb is to run a Doinb team. That's what every team he's been in. It's different players. It's just doing the same shit he wants.
It sucks. He actually improved and his whole team got worse. Like, it feels like, again, he was actually laning fine. He was like trying to become more of a carry on a lot of these like, control
Oriana and stuff. Yeah.
He was spamming Azir in solo queue. Like, this guy was trying hard, but I mean, he didn't even get a chance to play.
Yep, sucks. I mean, I guess the other team that we can talk about a lot is IG here, right? Like, these were the two fan favorites, you know, two of the teams that we saw at Worlds last year. Made that deep run, got to semis, and you know, this year,
I still can't believe IG isn't there. That is the team that is really criminal, because like they were before playoffs, basically. You would have bet bear in mind there's 4 spots. You would have just bet your life that they were going. Like, they looked like Shy and Lucky looked good again. They actually looked like they were going for sure.
They were my favorites to win it. Before playoffs, I thought IG were going to win LPL. They just beat TS 2 weeks before that. Like they were looking so good. It made no sense, like the collapse they had.
Even Baolan coming back, it made them look good. Like, everything was just, it looked like it was all leading to work.
Ning was like looking decent. Like everything was there.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah. So like, where did everything fall apart? Because I mean, these playoffs looked super fucking weird. I mean, we heard apparently there was like some translations that came out with the coaching and the Shy on like picks, and then we saw some games where it looks like the Shy is literally just like inting his team. Like if you saw this in solo queue, right?
Oh,
if I was
offensively bad.
Yeah.
Like put it this way, the only comparison I could give is when people saw Hooney go into academy and he just looked like he was like fucking his own teammates. Like, who gives a shit about this? It looked like that. But these are like playoff games in the LPL, guys.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Like I'm not talking about you had a bad game. If you have a bad game, this is like, it looks like you're actively, obviously not. I just felt stay for clarification, but like you're playing so badly, you may as well be on the other team. And this is the Shy of all people. And the worst thing is, it's almost like there's a logic to it because he's so insanely powerful as a player. He's the most powerful inter in the fucking world. I'm telling you right now. That's the whole reason I did that video because it was like offensive how bad he was in some of these games, guys. Really bad.
Yeah, I mean the game that became a meme in my chat was like the crit cannon. It's the one that everyone's referencing.
Oh my god!
The one where he's playing into Volibear, he goes Bork into the vault. Number one, he's like, I think it was like a perfect game that was set up for an AP cannon. I think he was like the only AP. Yeah, like so. At least that was how I remember it. It's like there was no AP on his team. It was like, oh man, this cannon is gonna be such a monster in team fights. And then he builds Bork, and it's like, okay, he built Bork. We'll see what he goes afterwards. Like maybe he's just gonna go like some type of like on hit build that's like better than that. And then he just starts building straight crit RFC second item, rapid fire cannon. Like what the fuck happened to this guy? Because it literally looked like he was just inting on stage.
The weirdest part was IG struggled so long of the split trying to find the Shy champions that like he can be a strong laner on, play that like lane kingdom style, but still transition to help the team well. And they finally found champions. Like they went back to the Kennen. He played Mordekaiser for the first time in his career in summer. He was like dominating on these picks. And I don't know like what happened in playoffs. I do think their first series against LGD wasn't his fault. Puff and Baolan got absolutely destroyed by Kramer and Mark. Mark was everywhere on the map with Peanut the whole time. That's when Peanut kept playing on Nidalee in that series.
Yeah,
I do think Yep, IG's draft I think also was terrible because every team knew when you play against LGD, you ban Twisted Fate, you ban Nidalee. These are by far their best champions. IG didn't do that at all that series. They got like bot lane got crushed, which meant Ning really didn't get a chance to play, which sucks since Ning was in decent form. And I feel like the Shy kind of had an okay series that one. The regionals one, I have no idea. Even like the AD Kennen one, it doesn't make sense for this meta where we're not playing around like hard side lanes where it's all about dragon fights. Two, like you said, he would have been. I think Ning was playing an AD jungler, so I think him and Rookie would have been the only AP champions. And the rest of their comp was completely built around like strong team fight setup and needing that last AoE champion. It blew my mind that he decided to go for that. It honestly makes no sense.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that like triggered people is just like the laughing while he was inting. Like he was literally running it down and just laughing on the camera, and it was like at some point, like it just starts pissing me off. It's like, come on, man. Like, I understand like if something real like you die in like egregious way where it's just like super troll, like just laughing it off, trying to like keep your mental or whatever. At some point, it looks like you're just having fun inting. Like it's just like damn.
Dude, that looked like he watches that fucking Breaking Point documentary. When it gets to the part where Dardok's like, "Bye, piggy," he's just like, "Oh, they have a great sense of humor in here. I might go there in the future."
Jesus Christ!
I don't imagine being in a match where you're trying to go to Worlds. And by the way, as he alluded to earlier, but he didn't like explicate upon, Rookie arguably was the MVP this year. Like he was unreal in summer. So him not going is even more egregious when the dude that he won Worlds with, he's just looking over like he's just permanently doing that Bjergsen meme from early in playoffs. Like, really, bro? Yeah. I'm trying to like 1v9 the game. Just please don't die. Just don't die again. Like that's what it was like.
Yeah, I mean,
Rookie, Knight, and Kanavi were the three best players in LPL. So the fact that Rookie doesn't get to be at Worlds, it seriously is like, it sucks.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, I don't know if like where should we come down on this? Is this just like LGD, being a strong team, or is this like an IG collapse? Is it more of just like IG just fucking dropped out of the sky?
I think it's an IG collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this team seriously needs to look into making changes next year. I mean, Thorne already alluded to it. Like, I actually think you alluded to, Dom, that this team's always had a history of like with their coaches not really like listening to them. They actually do have a films, like a video series on YouTube that has English subtitles. If people want to go check that out, that has like some of the communication. And you can see a lot of times in draft where their coach will be like, "Hey, I think this champion's the best champion," and one of the players will just be like, "No. Like, sure, that champion's the best, But if you give me this champion, I can carry. And it feels like they end up with so many bad drafts because of that. And I can understand like giving it to your star players, right? Like you should give your players something they feel comfortable on. But there also has to be a time where like maybe not even the coach, like even if it has to be Rookie or Ning or someone calling it on it and being like, yo, dude, like can you please not pick
just
this?
Pick
can you please
Orin.
pick for the team?
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's why the shy anecdote. People don't. The problem is people saw the first part of it, which is that he was told not to pick a champion. People missed the actual key element of the anecdote. So I'll repeat it here. For Game 3 of KT versus IG from 2018 Worlds, which obviously in the end, IG, it was actually the game where it was like the base race that KT won in the most mad fashion. It would have been a 3-0. But anyway, it didn't matter in the end. IG did win the series and obviously went on to win Worlds. So in the playoffs, like an elimination match, not on that particular game, but a match where you can be eliminated. Basically, the coach, who by the way is even worse, he is a Korean. So it's not even like it was the language difference. He told the shy, like basically,
don't pick Fiora.
Just don't pick Fiora. All I'm going to tell you is just don't. The shy not only picked it, they lost the game. Not his fault though. I'm just saying for context. Here's the part people don't get that is insane. Then, when being interviewed, by the way, not by an esports journalist, by Elle Men's Magazine in fucking China. So if ever you were going to lie and give a PR example, just maybe in a fucking pointless lifestyle magazine, we don't have to just tell the truth. In that interview, they just say to him the obvious question, a layup, as we would say in America. Like, well, if you were presented with that scenario again, would you do it again? Everyone who has been older than a 5-year-old boy and has ever been told off in school knows he's supposed to go, no, I wouldn't do it again, and I've learned my lesson. The shy goes, yes, I would pick it again. Just sits there like a fuck, like just because he's not from this earth. You have to understand, guys. This guy popped. He's like it's like fucking Steins Gate type scenario. He just popped out the wormhole and he's just here now, and we've got to deal with it. Like I don't know. This guy is one of the weirdest motherfuckers to ever play League of Legends. On the one hand, it means you get some of the most genius shit ever. On the other hand, you just get stuff like, I'll bet after that AD Kennen game, he's just like, well, just want you to all know, I would do that again. Right, see you next year. Like, what can you even do? This guy's ridiculous. In a way, I love it, Dom, but in another way, I know you're thinking this. I just think of being his teammate, and I just think, what an arsehole. I wouldn't be able to handle it. I would mold like a motherfucker. I know it.
I mean, like, the thing is, I would, like, if I was his teammate now, you know, I would just I couldn't be somebody like Puff, right? Somebody like Puff, I would just be like, oh, this guy's fucking trolling. If you're like Rookie, if you're somebody that's like won Worlds with him before, I feel like, you know, you give him the pass.
Reason to give him the pass, exactly.
Like if you're Ning or something, it's like, all right, you carried me to like a world championship. I mean, even though Ning did well in the finals, whatever. You carried me to a world championship for the most part. Like you can into like a semifinals here and there if you want. But I mean, I think that Kennen was like especially egregious because after that, like he just like he was like, yes, I am playing Orin. Like, but I'm still building Frozen Fist. Like, you can't stop me from doing that shit. People just.
I used to say, because I also sort of believe it about Rookie. Like, I secretly just want all the really good Koreans to go back to LCK at some point in their career and see if they can be like the best they can be in Korea. So, like, listen, obviously, I'd love to see like Rookie on like some fucking top elite to like some super duper squad. The problem is, after seeing all that, I actually hope the Shy never goes back to Korea because he would, no joke, he would just get benched instantly. Like, they would never tolerate that sort of behavior. So, I actually think LPL is the best place for him because as they've shown in the past, if you are a superstar, and especially a superstar Korean, you can just get away with some of that shit. Like you will just be allowed to stay on the team, which is mad because like that probably should be some sort of disciplinary bit, like action. But with a guy like that, you sort of, it's like you've gone that far with him. You're not just going to fucking dump him now, are you? Like you've lived through that for years. You're probably just going to keep going.
Yeah, is there even like a sub top laner on IG? Like, is there somebody that would even come in? Yeah, he doesn't even have a fucking replacement on deck. There's no Duke anymore, so. You know, I mean, that guy just fucking disappeared. Honestly, like I was just thinking about Duke. Like,
a long time.
I have no idea what happened to him.
Yeah. I mean, this guy like it was like he won Worlds, and you know, I mean, he didn't win Worlds based on him being like super insane or anything, but you know, won Worlds, and then it just benched for the Shy and never saw him again. I don't know. This guy just took him out. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. We talked about mainly like just all the LPL teams. If you were to pick one team, like outside of LGD, to like collapse at this World Championship, do you think that we have a chance of like, one of the major teams? Because so one theme that we've seen in general, just to preface this, is that Chinese teams do have like there are these random Chinese teams that do end up collapsing every year that people think are going to be super strong, right? RNG is a perfect example, right? People thought last year of course they're gonna fucking get out of this group. Like they're just a favorite, and they just end up not even making it. Is there a team outside of LGD that you think is like really susceptible to collapsing?
Doesn't have to be LPL though, right?
I would say LPL, but like if you want to just pick one in general.
Okay. What about the LPL teams?
I think it has to be Suning. Like, I have way too much faith in JDG and TS to do well at this tournament. I think they're the best two teams at this tournament, and I watched actually a lot of Dom1, but I think for Suning, coming into playoffs, I also didn't expect Suning to go to Worlds. So even though Suning ended 4th in the regular split over V5, V5 had a higher game difference in them, like they had a higher win rate, and I think V5 looked like a much better team coming out. Yeah, I mean, but even as the team, like, V5 were like so solid. They had like a very like clean play style. Suning are a team that, like, it's very hard to nail down what Suning's identity is. They were really slow in the regular split. Actually, coming into playoffs, they had the lowest, like they had the lowest first turret, they had the lowest first dragon, lowest first turret, like everything, because SOFM pretty much was just a farming jungler. Bin plays a lot of these like carry top laners, the Camille's, the Jaxes, and their team was just very disconnected. And I think coming like later into summer and coming to playoffs, the meta just kind of suited them really well, because Suning's biggest weakness, and it's why in spring they were like 16th or something, is they are like a horrible team fighting team in my opinion, because they have no one who can serve as a frontliner. Bin is a rookie out of solo queue. Bin's not really that good on tanks. I don't think Zoran's that good. His Wukong was like pretty int a lot of times. SOFM in spring, when it was Jarvan, we had things like Gragas. For some reason, he just has like this hesitation to pull the trigger. It's like it always looked like he was waiting for like the perfect engage, like that perfect angle to get like a E flash onto the AD carry and casket them into the team. So a lot of times Suning's team fights look like, okay, Sword Art goes in first, and he's already half HP by the time Bin's flank comes in, and it's like, okay, Sword Art's dead, Bin's dead, Huanfeng's now left by himself, he's instantly gone, and it's like, okay, well, what can Suning really do? I think Suning's a really weird team to kind of dissect, and they rely a lot on me to SOFM plus Sword Art. I think SOFM's in really good form right now, and even though I don't think Sword Art really individually is performing well, he kind of reminds me the narrative that's going on about like Hilly, to where I think Sword Art forces a lot of things that are good for the team, but he plays them so bad he does end up inting a lot of the time. And like, you see how convoluted this description was? That's how convoluted Suning as a team are. So I actually don't have a lot of faith in Suning. Even though they'll get out of this group, I really think they're screwed going into quarters.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to come down on Suning. I mean, the term that you described there is something that, so I'm trying to coin this. This is like positive inting to me. That's how I see Sword Art as a player. Where like, you'll die and you'll int, but you'll int to try to force action because you know that the action needs to be forced for the game. You're like, this is a time where we should fight. I don't give a fuck if I'm like dying for it. I'm just going to die so that we are fighting around this objective right now, because it's a lot easier for people to follow up on somebody already going in, somebody already that's like forcing the action, running into the fight. It's a lot easier to back somebody up than like choose, hey, I'm going to start this fight right here. So I think that that's like, the way that I would brand Sword Art. I still think that just even for that, he does have way too many of like the Hillsong ints, right? Like just the pure like, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like, you're just literally giving a free kill here. There's no reasoning behind what you're doing right now. So that scares me for sure on Suning.
We actually have quite a similar concept basically in Counter-Strike, which is in Counter-Strike, if I had to pick as a general like, abstract metagame description, the worst thing to have in the game would be loads of really strong players, but they're all like super defensive or like more passive players. None of them like to be like playmakers, aggressive. And so the kind of player you're describing, basically the engaged player, in Counter-Strike, we call them like space creator, because the idea is whether he gets the kill or not, like someone has to go into that area, occupy it, create an area that another player who isn't like him can then move into safely, where there's not like unknown people behind walls, potentially someone going to fight you immediately. Like he can then move in a little bit safer, knowing like, right, that space has been cleared by that guy. So like I would say it's a similar concept. Like these are teams, as we've alluded to, Fnatic, Suning, where if you just left them to their own devices without Hillsong and Sword Art, how would they ever start a fucking fight that they could ever win? Whether they like the fight or not would be irrelevant, right? And we all know from those comms, they would take like 1 out of 10 fights. So in this meta, you wouldn't even win the game off that. They wouldn't even get half the fucking dragons. So like in a way, you do almost need, when it's that extreme. You almost need a maniac like a Hylissang or someone to just go completely hammer, whether they die or not. It forces everyone else into the fight. That's basically the premise, I think, you know.
Yeah, I really think Suning needs Sword Art. Even hearing their comms, because, you know, our final and our regionals were at the venue and our desk was there, so we got to hear them. And I even knew this from the Flash Wolves days. Sword Art is the loudest player you will ever hear. He calls like absolutely everything for this team. And I really think he's the glue that holds them together because, again, I don't think SOFM on his own is like the most proactive early jungler. I think a lot of the time when we do see him creating action, it is typically like Sword Art roaming with him. And the fact that all of their lanes are really disconnected, like SOFM and Angel don't really have like good synergy. You never see SOFM go mid. You don't even see Angel like hover that much for, you know, SOFM's invades or Herald or Crab or anything like that. Bane I'd put in the same category. Like all of the laners are very to themselves. So they kind of need Sword Art to be that glue.
What'd you say, Thorn?
Like Team Liquid in that sense, then.
I mean, with a 50 times better jungler, maybe. Like,
yeah,
true.
And I mean, just by the fact, like the fault of them being like from the LPL, you know, they still fight like 50 times more than any other region team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing about SFM is like, I think this guy, like, I love his playstyle. You know, like I love like the efficiency based jungling where it feels like
you love Warmogs.
That's what I was gonna say. That's the thing that pisses me off. That's the only thing that I hate about this guy. Excuse me. Which is that he just builds Warmogs every single game for no reason. Like he builds it at times where it's like this is just literally hurting you. Like the other people have percent HP like damage built into their kits and everything, and he'll just go like Cinderhulk, Cleaver, Warmog. It's like, hey, any armor, any MR, anything here, guys? Like I don't know. It's so fucking crazy that he just builds like this every game. I don't know. It triggers me so much.
He doesn't even have like the 3,000 HP to get the passive either. It never makes any sense to me.
Yeah, no, I hate that shit. That shit really triggers me. He actually just gets fucking his head chopped off by Boris every game. But I mean, it's all good. He's good enough that I give him a pass for it. I just would respectfully request him to, you know, take a look at some other items that are available in the shop. You know, you can diversify, you know, your portfolio, so to speak.
No, they're the ones where, like, the other banter, aside from like the shopkeep beating them, is the one where I noticed the other joke the analysts always do is they're the ones where they're the one who found the MOBA Fire guide when they were Googling for it, like, you know, the champion select. Because, like, the idea is they always have some fucking build that looks like it was from, like, 5 years ago and, like, a totally different role. It's like the noob's just acting like Shyvana. He's got, like, the top lane build by accident. He's trying to build it as a jungler or something.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it feels good to play or something. I just imagine, like, you just feel like you get one shot when you build like that.
The only argument I can even like think of that he could have is, you know, it helps him stay on the map longer, but I think that's a terrible argument and I think it's a bad item. So okay. I mean, not even just like in his situations. I genuinely think it's just a bad item overall.
Same.
Also, what kind of angle is that? Like, listen, building this like health item lets me stay alive longer. It's like, well, yeah, but like it's got to go beyond that, hasn't it? That's step one. Like,
yeah. I mean, I always would take like because the thing about Warmogs is like for the item to be effective, you have to like go into a fight, lose your HP, back off, heal to full, and then fight again. And it's like I would always just rather be stronger for the first fucking fight. Like if you have the first fight and you just like you can't frontline as well, you have to back out earlier as a tank because you are taking more damage. If that's just how the fight is designed, it feels like it's a losing game anyway. So like what the fuck is the point of that? Like I would always prefer the item where it's like, hey, if I have it, I can stay in the fight, we can win the fight. Because if you win the fight, dude, it doesn't matter if like if you ace them or you kill 4 people, if you're at 300 HP or 3000 HP once you're hitting Baron. Like once you're in that situation, like outside of a couple freak champions, you're just gonna be able to like win the game anyway. So to me, that's just such a weird situation. So I think
I think a big part of it too is like you said earlier about the resistances is, I mean, HP is really only effective too if you have like the resistances to like fortify that HP. So I don't know, man. SOFM's a genius. I love it.
Yeah, he's fucking crazy. So one thing that we talked about, or we prefaced earlier, but or we mentioned earlier, I should say, that I wanted to discuss a little bit is your time that you spent in LMS. So you coached in Taiwan, so you have some idea of the players. I know you said you didn't watch much, and many of us Western fans have zero idea about the region. So like, how do you think we should be evaluating these like PCS teams coming into Worlds or like the players from this region?
I think it's like really weird actually, because theoretically, to me, PCS and even Japan and Vietnam, like these should be regions that are improving every year from the fact that they can play on Korean server and they do scrim against other teams. So I'm sure, actually, I know for a fact that Machi was scrimming some of the middle and lower tier LPL teams. I know from my time in LMS that like, if you're not necessarily if you're lucky. So the way it works is most, I'd say middle and bottom tier Korean teams, if you're from LMS or PCS, will give you like a tryout. They'll give you like one chance. If you show up in that scrim, you will get to scrim them again. If not, like sucks for you. They're going to find better teams. But I think from this angle, PCS player skill should be legit. Like they should be able to at least contend with, I'd say, 3rd and 4th seed from LPL. But from at least the parts of the games that I caught, and like I know some of the players, Mission used to be on my team, they play so slow. Like it feels very similar to NA when I watch it, where, I know it's like NA RAM kind of a meme, but it does feel like the PCS teams are like giving up way too many waves on side lanes. They're not forcing any proactive action early, especially PSG, who's in the play-in stage. Like the way they were known in PCS is to be the team that like punishes mistakes. And yeah, I don't have any expectations for either of these teams. I actually don't even think PSG will make it through play-ins. Maybe Machi can beat Team Liquid because, I don't have any expectations for Team Liquid either. But okay. Yeah, they've no chance of getting out of this group.
All right, sounds good. So the way that you'd evaluate it is like it's NA 2.0 that should be better. Like they have less excuses than NA because they can actually scrim better teams. Okay, all right, well. Makes sense. The other thing you mentioned, I think, before was just like the funding for PCS. It seems like after LPL died, it all went to shit.
Dude, there's no money. Like even going back in the day, an NA team could have bought the whole Flash Wolves roster in like season 6 for like half of the salary of like Impact. The best player on your yeah, exactly. Yep. Impact half of Impact salary could have bought Flash Wolves and HQ. So like there's no money in this region, and even the player base is so small. So sure, their players theoretically, I think, should be better because they get better practice. There's way less of them. There's like almost no competition at all. So I think there's just too many problems with this region.
Mm-hmm. So as a result as well, by the way, they lost nearly all the top talent. Like the Flash Wolves players went, 4-4 went. Like basically anyone who was like a name pretty much is gone now.
Yeah. Actually, another thing about this that no one knows because, it's not publicized or people don't care is almost, I'd say probably half the LPL teams have LMS coaching staffs from, the time in LMS. Like everyone who was an LMS coach and like the top half teams is working there. We had Stake, Warhorse with FPX last year. EDG has a coach. RNG also has another LMS coach. Obviously, Nelson, who was on your show the other day, Thorn, works with LNG. So it's not even just the players. All the people who develop players are all gone.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's like the only bit of hope for NA is like, Team Liquid is probably playing against an equally bad team in Group A, and if Suning massively collapsed, which is like, what we said was possible here, you might be able to get a team out of Group A. Like that's probably your best shot. All right, well, I think we got all the group stuff covered. We talked about LPL casters and everything like that. One topic that I found really interesting that I wanted to bring up, see your guys' thoughts on it, was the topic of Samira. So Samira just came out, and I think that more importantly than the champion just being broken, what was kind of like explained was just the mentality of Riot towards like new champions. Like Ender came out with a tweet where he pretty much explained that champions are intentionally created as overpowered because people associate fun with winning. So your champion like needs to be super, super strong. And I just wanted to like, broaden this topic in terms of like game balance. Like, do you think that this is like a healthy thing for the game? That we are like releasing champions so strong?
I think it sounds weird. It sounds weird in so many different aspects, but the one I want to start with is the fact that didn't Riot come out themselves and say that they were going to do the reverse? Like, didn't they say a few months ago that they want to actually release champions underpowered and like tune them up to a level that's fine? That's why I don't get this, like now this kind of like statement in this argument. It's just so weird.
Yeah, I think that that's an issue. But also just like in terms of just the idea behind putting a champion out that's super, super OP, what, like, doesn't that kind of just hurt the game or like hurt the credibility of the game? I mean, this isn't esports.
That's the competitive integrity of the game. I mean, what you're alluding to there, Dom, is basically it becomes a pay-to-win game. Like, if you're someone who doesn't buy the champion and you're just going to grind for a month to get it or whatever, you will never get it when it's broken. And everyone who's making you want to buy the game by playing it when it's broken just gets free wins off you. So now League of Legends as a game is about who can afford to buy the brand new champion when it's released and abuse it for the first month while it's inarguably broken. And let's be real, of the last 10 champions they've released, I'm maybe being generous if I say 2 of them weren't just utterly busted when they came out. So I don't buy the philosophy at all. Like, to me, this is one of those areas where Riot will always attempt to have their cake and eat it. They will always simultaneously tell you, oh, we don't do it for that reason. We're not cynical and just trying to make money. Well, just obviously they are. They just don't want to, like, their logic is, well, if you can get away with it, why admit it? So they just claim, oh, no, we really thought in the PBE made sense where it was at. Like, none of that ever makes any sense. Like, when he says in his example here, I assume he's literally talking specifically about this one, Samira, right? And maybe he's even referencing something a dev might have told him behind the scenes. Because when he says, for example, that what he says here, the champion team creates a champion that is fresh, rewarding to players and against, right? Can I introduce you, Ender, to a champion called, the fuck? I've actually forgotten the name now.
Which one?
What's the cat one called? What's the fucking shit?
Oh, Yuumi?
Yeah, there we go. Right, can anyone just apply that logic? Does that philosophy apply to Yuumi? Is it rewarding to play as or against? In my opinion, the reason why Yuumi was universally flamed is because even the people winning on it couldn't feel like it was a good champion. They were like, well, I don't really fucking do anything, do I? Just stand next to the guy and just shoot that thing out. That's it. That's all you do. And hilarious, we won. Like, if anything, teams even took that as like, it was meme, wasn't it? So it's always going to be a worrying sign, by the way, if the people who abuse the champion are like, that shit's broken. Like, that's a really worrying sign if you're ever in game dev. Like, that should be the guy defending you. If you go and follow a game like StarCraft where they play the different distinct races, mate, there are players who play the one that's broken that'll argue to the end of time like 50 reasons as to why it's not broken, or they'll use some circular logic of like, well, it's fine that it's broken because your race was broken 2 years earlier, so why don't we get our time? Like, they'll go some angle. So like, I don't really know where Ender's coming from this one. I don't mind the angle of like, let's create a space where we can have discussions and maybe Riot has a different philosophy to us. Okay, maybe, but I don't think he did a very good job arguing that in this particular case, or it only applies to this one champion as far as I can tell. Like, that wouldn't apply to the last few that were mega busted. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stands out is like the and against part of that. Like, it's rewarding to play with and against. Because and against, it's like, I feel like they just remove so much counterplay from champions nowadays, where it's like, okay, this champion can go in, right? And if it was rewarding to play with and against, it wouldn't have a circular wind wall where you can't throw skill shots at it, like when it has its W up or whatever. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. It's like, if you want it to be rewarding to play like against it, then why are you giving these champions so many tools to be able to counterplay everything that you throw at it? Like, a champion can't have every single strength and have no weaknesses. Like, there has to be the weaknesses to complement the strengths in order for a champion to be worthy to play against. So it just seemed super, super strange that was like an argument used for Samira, because it's like, yeah, it just doesn't make sense contextually when you look at the champion's kit. Like, they built it so that it's not fun to play against.
I mean, even just the logic of it, you can release a champion like OP, like, and they're admitting it, right? They're admitting that they're releasing it too strong, but also saying like their goal is to make it rewarding to play against. It just contradicts itself.
Yeah.
I'll even say, I think you've nailed another thing as well to me, Dom. To me, the lesson we should have learned, problem is I can't remember half the fucking champions today. The problem from Aphelios that everyone should have learned, what everyone was screaming to Riot is, it's not even about it being OP. It's that it is counterintuitive. Forget it's not intuitive. It's counterintuitive. Like, some of the things you see lie to your eye. Like, that's not what that's going to do. Well, that's not what you think it's going to do based on past champion interactions. Here's the problem I have is, it's one thing if something's broken. Like, when they released that Yorn champion, obviously everyone was just dumpstering everyone for the first week where like idiots didn't know, like, just wait till it goes backwards to the point it originally came for. But like, once you get that doesn't even take many games. It's pretty intuitive, actually. You realize, like, right, yeah, it's mad OP when it's going forwards, but if some of my teammates can wait where he has to go back, then we just get him at the end, and if he hasn't killed us all, that's fine. The problem with this champion, the Samira one, is it reminds me way more of the Aphelios angle, where it's like you're playing against it, you're like, I've just played 2 games, I still don't understand what's going on. Like, what the fuck? Do I have to now, this is the worst to me, do I have to now buy the champion myself and play that role in champion just to have a chance of playing in a game game against it. To me, if that's the threshold, like you've ruined your own game. Because to me, what made League one of the biggest games in the world is that you can just be a player in bronze and you can just like Lulu and just lock it in every time in that one role and just don't give a fuck. Like you can probably have a half decent game no matter what year it is. Like you're at a low enough level. Everyone isn't godlike. X doesn't beat Y every time. You can just have a fun game. If you then go into that game and you're like, right, I was out of the game for 3 months, so I don't know what 3 of these champions do, and they're all over my face 24/7. That's the opposite of a fun time. Like, That's why I always want to know, what angle are you balancing for? If you balance for the pro scene, we can have a million great discussions. If you're balancing only for the fun angle, by the way, we'll take that into consideration. We won't be as harsh on the pro scene, but they always, they always claim it's both, don't they? Yep. Even though, as far as I can tell, it's impossible.
Yeah, I don't know how it can possibly be both, right? Because if you think about it, right, the champions they always use this argument for like the really like pro play heavy champions. They're like, oh well, like we have to keep Azir and like Ryze really really weak because it's OP in pro play. It's like, well, how the fuck is that fun for the Azir or Ryze player that's stuck in gold? Yeah. Like, this guy is fucking miserable. He's like, I can't fucking play this game. Like, I'm shit already, and now my champion is extra shit because some guy is really, really insane at some combo I can never pull off. Like, I can't shuffle shit myself. How the fuck, like, is this gonna, is this gonna be something that's gonna benefit me? It's like, oh, well, if I get really, really good on the champion, like, then it'll be rewarding. It's like, well, it's just not gonna happen. Like, it's just not fun for those types of players. And then I guess on the Samira point is like, for me, it wasn't as much like that Samira was counterintuitive. It just felt like hopeless to play against in my experience. It was like, oh, so as long as the guy is not a complete bot and he doesn't just ult into the middle of the entire team, or like E and then ult into the middle of the entire team at the beginning of the fight where we all are like waiting for him and we have CC, then he's just going to win the whole thing. It's just this like ticking time bomb where if you ever start like evening out the fight, or if you use any skills at all, you just auto lose. And if you don't use any skills at all, you're just going to lose the fight straight up anyway. So I don't know. I feel like the Samira point was just like, it just makes no sense. It feels like people just want to, just defend Riot. Like, people that are part of Riot just want to defend Riot blindly, but they don't actually want to like engage in a conversation, because none of this felt like, a conversation that was meant to be had. I mean, one of the points that he goes on to say later on is that specifically like, well, 99% of you guys would suck at this, so you guys can't criticize, which I felt like was super, super weird coming from a shoutcaster, because it's like, I mean, I don't know. Like, dude, how many people were players first and then became shoutcasters, right? Oh. Like, if you were at least a pro player, and you played on the fucking stage, you put 5 years of your life into that shit, then maybe you could come with that approach of like, 99% of you can't fucking do this shit, so shut the fuck up. But coming from like a shoutcaster to say that, it's like, dude, you criticize pro teams all the time, and you could, like, even at your peak, you could never play in that fucking game. So, like, what the fuck is that? Is that, like, random, just no, piece of bullshit that people come in?
It's like I always used to say to LS and Local, because they also love that angle of, like, my friend who's a pro player and one of the best in the world says X. I was like, mate, shall I just go and get Faker now to say Y? And if I say that, do I win the argument? Like, what sort of stupid metric are we using here? Like, you've got to have a point. Because that's the other part. Is like, I also even found the whole premise weird, Dom. Like, the whole angle of like, well, they have to release it overpowered because people want to win, and fun comes from winning. It's like, man, there's so many like loaded fucking like considerations you've just built in there that like, I think we'd have to unpack those before we can get to the bottom of that. Like, what? Like, where did this come from? Like that, I don't want to play the game just to win. I've never even understood that. Like, when they imply there that champion has to be strong to be fun, I don't even know that that's true. Like, when I think of fun in League of Legends, you either play the strong shit to win, right? So you play what's broken this month, or you play what's fun because you're just having fun. You're not playing to win, are you? Like, if I play a game of like Thresh, I play that because the kit's just fun as fuck, isn't it? Like, if you know what you're doing, you might lose the game, but feel like you're in the game. You could do things like utility. Like, to me, that has nothing to do with the champion being strong. What a weird premise to start from. Because by his logic, if it's fun, like, think about it. Think about this, Ender. If it's fun for a guy who's never played a champion before and he's now in ranked playing it, how much fun is it for the other 9 people who are playing against a champion that guy's barely played and he's beating them with it? Like, that's shit. That is objectively terrible for the other 9 people in the server. Even his teammates are probably going like, what the fuck even is this? Like, what? He's just good on it after the first pick. Like, that's really worrying. To me, it should be the opposite. Like, I don't mind them being broken when they come out because logically no one knows how to use all the champions. So listen, the best player will exploit it way more. I get that. But like, I don't know how you can argue they don't come out way overtuned and then go the opposite way and just tone them down till they're acceptable. It's just clearly the MO. And it's hard to argue against.
Yep.
I mean, even the fact that they already, like, massively like nerfed hotfixed, I think already even kind of shows that Riot, no, they made a bit of a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, it's either a mistake, which I'm completely fine with, and that's what I think happened, or if you're like taking everything that he said at face value, it's just like, it's just horrible fucking business practice, because then you just released it intentionally super fucking overpowered, got everyone to buy this shit, and then nerfed it into the ground and like, gotcha, bitch, like stole your fucking money. Like that's like really fucked up. So I think it was actually just as the champion was
ethical in some ways, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, mommy, everyone else has got Samira. It's like, right, I'll buy you it then. Like, mom, they banned it now. It's like, what? I just bought you that. I spent money on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's...
Riot Games nerfed it.
Yeah, that's super strange. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I think we covered everything. Obviously, this episode, we didn't have group stage games to talk to. We didn't have play-in games to talk to. We still went through all of the LPL teams coming into Worlds. A brief look at some of the teams that didn't make it, primarily FPX and IGs, everyone's favorite here from the West. Talked a little bit about Samira, the new champion, released, and some of the ideas behind balancing. So I think it was definitely a solid episode. We normally open it up to our guests here. If there's anything you wanted to talk about on the show, any topics you had in mind that you think we didn't cover, we can throw it to you. If not, we can just wrap it up here. So it's really just your choice on this one. Is there anything that you think we just didn't cover, or anything you wanted to talk about on the show?
Not necessarily something I want to talk about, but I at least will say before we go that I hope more people, like watching the show, will give LPL a chance next year, even if, you don't give a fuck or know about the teams. I mean, Dom said it many times on all of the shows that you guys watch. This is the funnest region to watch. Like, doesn't matter that I cast this region. If I stopped casting today and just went back to coaching next year, I'd watch LPL because LPL is fucking awesome. So watch LPL. And, thanks Thorn and Dom for, being two people who actually do a bunch of content about LPL because, again, this region's so underrepresented.
Yeah.
By the way, I'll even tell people, here's how you watch LPL if you don't care about the region as a whole. Because they play so many best of threes, just watch the hype matchup. Just watch the marquee matchup. If you hear, for example, I heard like Jing Dong and Top, just wait until they play and just watch their best of three. You don't have to watch the rest, but you'll just be able to keep it ticking along. Then when the playoffs come, now you can get into it. Now you can start to watch all the games, you don't have to watch, like there are a million games, don't worry. You're never going to get and watch them all. Like no one can even who works the region. But like I say, that's the best reason to watch it. Is like, let's say you don't watch LCS. Even then, if you don't watch it, you're going to be like, do I give a fuck about a best of one? But this is a real match, so you can watch real best of threes. So, just watch the best matches, basically. Don't watch every filler game, but just watch the big ones.
Yep, and it's a great region to watch because it's just like visually exciting. Like there's so much action that happens in this region. There's so much fighting that just even if you're a casual fan, you'll probably really enjoy the experience. And then on just like the higher end, I mean, this team won Worlds the last 2 years. Coming into this World Championship, they're definitely the favorites again. Most likely the strongest region in the world and the best one to watch. So yeah, I love watching LPL. These guys love watching LPL, and you guys should watch LPL too. Anyways, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you being on the show, taking time with us today. Lyric, I'm sorry my voice was like giving out towards the end here. Have a little bit of a cold, but yeah, I definitely appreciate you guys doing the show, and we'll see how Suning and LGD do coming into Worlds. Thanks for being here.